All right, okay. So on Monday, we talked about this age of exploration a little bit further. Okay, we are finishing up the chapter, so quiz on Friday. Anyway, so the Columbian Exchange, triangular trade, transatlantic slave trade. Okay, this is all what we talked about on Monday. All right, what do we got? What do we got? So, Columbian Exchange, let's talk about it. Who was named after? Reagan. Yeah, good job, right? Pretty big. Good. And then we mentioned about how this was trade, right? Obviously, European countries are coming down to Africa. They were trading different types of metals, and obviously different types of silvers, minerals, even weapons, armor to the African tribes. Okay, and then they would obviously interact with other African tribes groups. A lot of times, actually stealing many of their population in order to receive these riches from the Europeans. And in return, right, European countries would get slaves to work in the new land. All right, so with this Columbian exchange, okay, what we're talking about with these resources and materials being taken over back and forth, Europe and the Americas. Well, there's a lot of resources that these European markets were getting in return and advancing their marketplace, making a lot of profit off it. Again, from the very beginning, the start of it, who controlled trade in the Mediterranean? What two countries controlled trade, which started this age of exploration? Two entities. Conrad? What's that? Yeah, Italy, right? The Ottoman Empire. So that prompted these countries to expand. And yeah, Spain, they stumbled across the New World with Columbus. All right, so yeah, the video and what we talked about on Monday showed you a figure on your presentation when it comes to peppers, tomatoes, squash, sweet potatoes. All right, a lot of resources that you can only find in the Western Hemisphere. And as they're being exchanged in these European marketplaces, they're making a lot of money, a lot of profit off it. And again, with wealth comes what? With wealth comes what? Power, right? Good job. So these countries are becoming very dominant, very powerful during this time. All right, one thing to note though, as the Europeans are interacting with the New World, which we talked a little bit about with these stores, what was unfortunately unintentional sometimes, right? What was the native population receiving? Something microscopic. Killing off 90% of the population of the natives in the New World. In fact, diseases, right, like smallpox, right, measles, tuberculosis, you name it. There's many of them that obviously rampage through the New World. Again, their immune systems weren't interactive with this type of bacteria, these types of infections. So they wiped out a lot of population. Some expect 20 to 50 million, right, native groups, right, native people died, okay, in the New World from this interaction. All right, so with the transatlantic slave trade, we mentioned a little bit about that on Monday too, and how this trip over weeks, maybe even months, to the New World through the Middle Passage. Obviously, some come to Brazil with Portugal controlling that what land down here, but also to the Caribbean islands and to North America. All right, the slave trade would transport over 12 million African slaves through this middle passage across the Atlantic Ocean. And I showed you that figure, that image on Monday of how they would stack literally all the African slaves in these ships. Okay, it was brutal, it was terrible, right? And you can only imagine the conditions here. There's nowhere to go to the bath. Right? There's nowhere, there's no food, no water really for a lot of these African slaves. Some tried to rebel, some tried to fight up against some of these ship captives the European countries were sending across the Atlantic Ocean. But obviously, none really were successful. Some were, not many. What will they do with the dead? What will they do with the dead on their way over? Go throw them overboard. There's a lot of reports actually that there were sharks that would follow these slave ships just because, well, they kind of recognized that there would be a lot of bodies blown off the ships as they're making their trip across the Atlantic Ocean. So, yeah, there's a lot of reports of that dating back to this time of this Atlantic slave trade. So this starts right again as these European countries are settling the New World, and it would last all the way up until the end of a war in America that was divided. What was that war? 1860. that war? Reagan? No, no, slave trade will last all the way up to this point. I like where you're going though. We're gonna talk about that here soon. The 1860s in there. Oh, and the Civil War, right? Good, good. All right, so with the slave trade, again, how brutal it was, how terrible it was, and how the trade for literally people and resources over in Africa was happening, even sending the African slaves across the Atlantic. All right, obviously the work was awful, right? It was terrible. Obviously, no food, no water, long days, long working hours, all in order to extract resources through this fragmented trade. All right. Also, I want to talk. Oh, so we are going to move in a direction here where we're going to talk about conflicts between these European countries. So yeah, over in Europe, but also in the New World. And yeah, there will be a war that starts in the New World, the Western Hemisphere. And this is known as the First Global War between these European powers fighting in other lands. Reagan, what was that one? The French and Indian War. Good. So we'll talk about the 7 Years' War here shortly, here soon, and how this is going to be known as the first global conflict, because it's fought pretty much all around the world, in Asia, parts of North America, obviously, and in Europe. All right, is there any questions here? Any questions about the Columbian Exchange, triangular trade, transatlantic slave trade? Okay, I will have a booklet for you. I'll probably put it on the announcements, okay, for you guys to look over, and we'll play it tomorrow towards the end of class. So then you guys are more prepared for the quiz on Friday. All right, so here are your terms for today. Like I said, as these countries, these European countries, are making their way to the New World, well, they are going to run into each other sooner or later. Sooner or later, they're going to compete against one another, which they kind of already are through their marketplaces, through the resources and trade routes that they're accessing. All right. But anyway, one of the wars I want to focus on, which we've mentioned a little bit already through this Reformation chapter, as we're talking about Elizabeth I, right, and how she became such a dominant world leader, and how England became such a world power. I know I just briefly went over it. Today we're going to focus on it a little bit more in detail. So this war between Spain and England, and why it started, what happened, who was victorious, which now we know England is, and how this is going to cause a shakeup with these countries becoming world powers. All right, so we got the Spanish Armada, colonization, which we'll mention a few of them, which you guys know a lot already for sure, when it comes to the colonies being established in the New World. Bless you. All right, so with the Spanish Armada, we're going to focus on that today, and well, the defeat of Spain in this war, which allows England to become the next world power, and they'll continue this dominance, becoming this world power and solidifying themselves for a long time, right? And setting up colonies in the New World. All right, but anyway, for these countries and these colonies that are being established in the New World and all around the world, right, a lot of these countries are expanding and extracting resources and areas and lands that the other really can't have access to. Right, we talked about England along the northeast part of what we know as the United States, and France just more in the Ohio River Valley, right, moving down the Mississippi River. So again, you have England right here along the east coast of the United States, France right behind it. Sooner or later they're going to butt heads, which they do. Reagan, what war's that again? Yeah, French and Indian War. Okay, so we'll talk about that here shortly for next chapter. All right, then obviously we mentioned a little bit about Portugal, how they solidified these means of trade and new trade routes around the African continent, moving into Asia, right, and solidifying that trade route, which pushed and prompted a lot of these other countries like Spain, like England, right, like France, to expand west and find the New World. Right, but yeah, Portugal still does have access to, Brazil, right, and parts of South America. Spain, we already talked about, okay, conquering these lands in the Caribbean islands, Central America, South America, and moving into parts of what we know as Southeast and Southwest in the States. All right, the Dutch, we'll mention a little bit more about that next chapter, but with the Dutch, they are expanding in the Asian market a lot more. Okay, they're a lot more successful because we have these joint stock companies, charter companies, where they're not looking to spread Christianity also. Their goal is to try to make and enhance trade and make as much profit as possible. So it's not like Spain, where they're just coming over and conquering and taking over the lands and changing the ways of interaction, changing the ways of culture and religion to areas. So that's how they have access to these East Asia marketplace. So even Japan, we'll talk about Japan closer to World War I and World War II. And we'll talk about how they were shut off from the rest of the world for a long period of time. And the reason for it is because they know what's going on in China, parts of India, right, and parts of East Asia by these European countries as they're converting a lot of their culture, religion to their ways. And, well, Japan doesn't want to do that. And they're allowed to, they can shut themselves off from this trade and this interaction because they are a what? They're an island, right? So they can shut themselves off. They can close their borders from the European countries. All right, so that's something to know. The French, we'll mention, they're more in Canada, moving into the Ohio River Valley, moving down the Mississippi River. And they too, somewhat like the Dutch, their goal is to try to trade more than anything. And they'll enhance and embrace this fur market, this fur trade, okay, through different types of trapping, obviously, in the Ohio River Valley, expanding down the Mississippi River, accessing a lot of resources and materials through trade with the native groups. Okay, so in the French and Indian War, they do have more of an alliance, I guess you'd say, with the native groups. They have access to obviously their tribes, which helps them in the war early on. Later, well, the English will set different types of alliances with native groups, dividing them up against one another, and well, wreaking a lot of chaos and anarchy in the North American continent. All right, and we talked about England. You guys know the 13 colonies, obviously, too, with the Caribbean islands. Right, they'll expand there, especially when it comes to the sugar trade. And also India. Right? India will be known as England's crown jewel. Okay, when it comes to resources, materials they can find there. And, well, yeah, the indigenous people there, they'll look for slaves in their own country, which obviously the population is very big there. Right, very large. All right, anyway, here's a good map, kind of symbolizing, showing this expansion in the New World for these countries. As you can see here with Spain, they dominate pretty much the whole Central America, moving down to South America. And what was that line called that separated Portugal's advancement, Spain's in the New World, and also East and West dividing? What was that called? What was the line called? The line of demarcation set up by the Treaty of? Olivia? Tordesillas. Yeah, good job. But anyway, I just talked about this, guys, when it comes to England, right? You can see in red, France in blue, green, Spain, right? And then you have your orange right there with Portugal, okay, and how that line of demarcation separates from east and west. But still, holding possessions in South America. All right, so pretty cool. So with Russia, well, I don't know if we'll get to talk about it too much, but later down the line, right, with Russia, they'll eventually sell off that territory to the United States shortly after, well, right around the Civil War era to the U.S. And that'll be known as Seward's ice box. Well, why Russia? Why would you want that? What's up there? Well, there is a lot of resources and materials that you can find there. Also, when it comes to expanding America's presence out in the Pacific, great asset. All right, so the Spanish Armada. Okay, so the Spanish Armada. All right, so this conflict here between England and Spain, well, a lot of it stems from religion. We talked about it with the Reformation, mentioned about how, right, with England, they broke away from the Catholic Church. Way back with who? What was that guy's name? He had 6 wives. Reagan? Henry VIII. Yeah, good job. Good. All right, so it kind of starts there and moves in this direction where it's kind of back and forth when you look at it, from Edward VI pushing for Protestantism, then you get Bloody Mary come in and try to get back to Catholicism, and then yeah, you got Elizabeth I coming in and says, you know what, we're going to take more of a common ground, focus on the state, focus on the nation, in a form of politique, which is going to kind of meet the needs of both sides, right, and not try to choose what religion they're going to focus on. So this allows for England to grow. Okay, it allows England to expand, and in some ways catch up to Spain, to Portugal in this age of exploration. So for England, they start building up their navy under Elizabeth I, right? We mentioned this already. We talked about how this was the golden age for England as they're expanding to these new lands, these new worlds, in search for that Northwest Passage, right? They try to find this connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, right? Also, well, this is known at the time towards the end of the 1500s, well, where Spain's role as the number one world power, it dwindles. It comes pretty much to an end. They're still going to have a strong presence in the New World. I'm not saying that's going to go away, but Spain will never try to target or rival another European country from here on out. And the reason for it is because they put everything, all their efforts, all their resources in creating this huge Spanish Armada, this huge fleet of ships that were massive, had many weapons and cannons, artillery placed on top of these ships. Okay, and a lot of it too was funded by, guess who? Spain embracing Catholicism. Who do you think would fund this? To try to get back at England from breaking away from the Catholic Church. Who's the leader of the Catholic Church? Olivia? The Pope, right? So even the popes get involved in this conflict between England and Spain. And, well, you got to figure it stems back to their separation from the Catholic Church. So, yeah, even the Pope, even the Catholic Church starts to send funding and resources to help create this huge, massive fleet of ships for Spain. Well, England starts to realize this, right? Obviously, they're not dumb. They know that this fleet of ships is being created. They do reconnaissance. They do some sort of surveying out in the Atlantic Ocean, seeing what type of riches and resources Spain has. Also, you got to imagine Spain and England on top of each other, right? Whoever can defeat whoever, right? Obviously, this will set up and establish more of a means of trade and for the country to become a world power. So England sees this build of the ships. They realize that this fleet is coming for them. And Spain, well, one thing that kind of kicked them in the rear end here that didn't allow them to win this conflict out in the open water is that there was a mismanagement, right? Okay, the leadership that was aimed to try to take this fleet up to England and defeat the English Royal Navy. Well, the leader, okay, set by Philip II, he died kind of midway between the buildup of this navy. So Spain, thinking that, oh, this should be an easy win, we'll just put someone in less experienced, someone that doesn't really have the ability to navigate out in open water. And, well, that would later bite them in the butt. So mismanagement, one reason why this didn't really work out. Also, with Spain, as they're making their way up the French coast here, right, they start to dock their ships along the northern part of France. So they start to dock their ships to try to prepare for the battle that's going to rage on here. So they dock their ships right around here, guys. So with Spain, they docked their ships, try to resupply, come up with a game plan to try to choke off England, to try to surround it, and cut off any resources and materials coming in. The best way to defeat an enemy is cut off the resources, cut off the materials. And let's face it, England's a what? What is it? It's an island, right? So this will be done a lot. Try it anyway. By a lot of European countries to defeat England. A lot of times it doesn't work. Right, so with Spain, they start to dock their ships up in the northern part of France. You got to realize too, France, England, they have a good relationship at this time. Now, they just got done with 100 years war. France hates it. So you got to imagine France is going to be a little bit kinder to Spain. Also, Catholicism comes deep. That's something that people focus in. One thing to note though is before the Spanish Armada could even get out of the open water in the English Channel, England decided to pretty much, in other words, I don't really have to find enough word, kamikaze their ships into the Spanish Armada. Right, the English ships weren't near as large. They didn't have as many weapons, but they're more maneuverable. They're smaller. They're faster. Okay, and well, with these kind of dirty tactics, England defeats them in a manner that's non-conventional. So they actually set their ships like a battering ram, start them on fire, literally set their own ships on fire, and sail them kind of like a kamikaze into the Spanish ships and destroy them in the dock, destroy them even before they get out in the English Channel. So in this flurry, in this panic, Spain starts to release a lot of their larger ships out in the English Channel, thinking that they can make it through the English and thinking that they can just get away from the burning docks, the burning ships that's going to destroy their whole armada right then and there. And as they do so, well, they weren't prepared. So as they're out in the English Channel, they kind of get thrown off course, right? And so much so that they lose the presence and lose exactly where they're at, navigation-wise. So this allows the English to continue these strikes, continue these attacks with a lot better maneuverability, these fast-paced ships, and take out the Spanish Armada. And some of the ships, too, from Spain, made their way up, way by Ireland, and way up here, right? As they're trying to escape this flurry, as they're trying to escape this destruction that England has placed. And as they do so, well, they get lost at sea. And poor weather conditions cause these ships to just destroy. So, in other words, England through non-conventional methods, Spain with poor leadership, and, well, with weather conditions, poor navigation by Spain, this allowed for England to win this, even if the tide was against them, even though the scale was tipped against them. And Sir Francis Drake was one of the heroes for England in this battle, in this open water battle. And, well, in this effort for Spain to try to defeat England, they drained their treasure. They drained everything. All the resources, all the money, all the wealth that they had. But no, it was wasted just like that. I would say it was wasted. They tried, but again, poor management, poor weather conditions, and just more maneuverable ships by England, they defeated. One thing to know about Sir Francis Drake is that he witnesses for England with this method, this idea of just randomly burning ships into the harbor, right, in the Spanish Armada in northern France. Also, he's the first Englishman to what? Does anybody know? Sir Francis Drake. Might be a bonus question. Just like Magellan, what did Magellan do? Even though he didn't do it. Screw him. Owen? Yeah, he's the first Englishman to circumnavigate around the world. So the first person from England to do so. And guess what? He survived. He made it. So I guess that's one up on Magellan. Okay. So the Spanish Armada is defeated. And this is going to push, again, this golden age for England. Now England has the ability to grow even more. Now England has the means to rise even more as a world power and to become stronger and stronger, which we know is which we know expand themselves even more, not only in just North America, but eventually in Africa, eventually in Asia, right? So much so that they will control about, it's a crazy number, it's about over 50% of the world's land in the world through colonies, through their influence alone, right? England through this time, through the 1600s, moving up even towards World War I. Pretty amazing stuff. All right, so here's a look real quick, right, of these attacks, right, of these methods used by England, by the Spanish, right? This was the idea of the Armada, what they're going to do, trying to choke off the English, but it didn't work. Again, with these non-conventional methods that England was using, and just with better planning, England just took out the Armada even before they could set sail on the English Channel, even before they could get going. All right, so we'll talk about colonization a little bit more tomorrow, mercantilism, and talk about how this new sense of economic system is going to emerge when it comes to capital, when it comes to trade, when it comes to influence around the world through money, right? All right, is there any questions? The Spanish Armada, how England becomes even more of a world power. Okay.